I wonder why I'm as tired as I am. But I'm trying to get better at getting back here earlier in the evening than 10 p.m. Feels like when I get here at 10 p.m. and here for an hour, it's so close to midnight, which is when I want to try to go to sleep. It ends up being a unfortunate timing, because then I don't really have the time to do anything afterwards. So trying to get back on track. Let's see what's this is. Stop doing that. So we're end of April. Oh, yeah. Talking with some people about things I could do differently. I have a friend who's an artist, and she applies for lots of grants. And I don't think I've ever applied for one. I kind of need to learn some of how that system works, because I've got projects that I'm sure would qualify, and if I could get that to work for me, that would be great. And then there's a competition going on right now. I believe it's Atlas Obscura is doing something right now. And their thing is, I think it's like you have to submit by the end of tonight. But if you're, it's like the travel trip of your dreams or something like that. So it's like a bit of money towards a travel adventure of some kind. I don't imagine I'm gonna win it. Like, this is phase 1, so it's a application, and then they'll ask for submissions for narrowing down the top 25 proposals that they receive. So I'll just throw in a proposal and see what happens. But I need to pay a little more attention to doing some of those kinds of things, because I think that's an avenue that would enable me to do more than I'm doing now. I'm not sure how to make any of that necessarily work out. Oh, wow, that's attractive. Just keep yawning. Wow, my brain is really just all over ready to go take a nap for no apparent reason. Talking a little bit about just trying to figure out what direction I want to take some of the stuff that I'm working right now. I mean, like, one of the things, like, I know I sort of went on an all night long spiel last night about the Avengers Endgame movie, and I really did enjoy it. But when I was talking about potentially introducing my mom to it, like, I know that she doesn't have it in her to go through 20 some odd movies just to get to the Infinity Wars and Endgame. And so doing that would be too much for her. But I felt like I hit on something for a second that I thought would be kind of fun to do, was do a summary series where I summarize each of the movies in the series. And I was sort of saying it as like not quite a joke, but like, if only there were a Cliff Notes version of them. And I got to thinking, like, oh, it might be kind of fun to do that, honestly. 20 episodes of 5 minutes or less telling you what the story is for each of the Marvel movies. That would be amazing. I do feel like you still have to see Avengers 1 and not Civil War. Captain America, Winter Soldier. So Avengers 1, Captain America, Winter Soldier. And I think you can get away with then going Infinity War and then Endgame. So, I mean, 2, 4, 6, 9, so maybe about 10 hours total of movies. But with the, like, I think it was like phase 1 had only like 5 or 6 movies in it, I think. There we go. Let's pull that up. Look at that again. I think what I would like to do with that, is okay, where's the list? There we go. Okay, so Iron Man, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, First Avenger, and then Avengers. So it is 6 movies long. But if 5 minutes for each of the other 5, that would be 25 minutes plus the 2 hours. And then phase 2 is Iron Man 3, Thor, Captain America, Winter Soldier is the one you want to watch there. That's an unfortunate choice of finger for that. And then Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, and then Ant-Man. So that's 6 again. It gives you, again, 5 movies that you can do as a 25-minute short, like a series of 5-minute summaries, with Winter Soldier being the 2-hour marker. And then phase 3, Civil War, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I sort of feel like you can just skip Spider-Man Homecoming, but I'll throw it in there. Thor Ragnarok. That one's kind of fun. I would recommend seeing it, but I think we can probably do that. So Civil War, Doctor Strange, Guardians, Spider-Man, Thor, Black Panther. So that's 6. And then Infinity War, Ant-Man and Wasp, Captain Marvel, and Avengers Endgame. So there are 10 in phase 3. And there are 2 of the big movies for that. So I would almost split that into 2 phases. I would do Captain America, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor Ragnarok, Civil War, Doctor Strange, Guardians, Thor Ragnarok, and then Infinity War. No. We need Captain America Civil War, Guardians of the Galaxy, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, Thor, and then Infinity War. And then you would do Ant-Man and Wasp, Captain Marvel, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange. I don't know. I feel like the Ant-Man and Wasp and Spider-Man and Captain Marvel can all come after Infinity War. I'm not sure Like, Guardians of the Galaxy doesn't need to be in that time slot before Infinity War. Yeah, it is. It's an unbalanced split of that 10. I'd have to think about that one a little more. And I'm wondering if I did Captain Marvel after Endgame, would that make a difference? Not really. The ones we have to pay attention to have to happen before Infinity War. So you need Black Panther to understand Wakanda. You kind of need to understand Thor's situation. Like, not much of Doctor Strange needs to be seen before Infinity War. Civil War definitely needs to be seen. So Captain America Civil War needs to be understood at least. Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther. I would put Guardians in there as well. And then I would say Infinity War. And then you can follow that with Doctor Strange. Spider-Man. Ant-Man and Wasp, Captain Marvel, and then Avengers Endgame. I think that's a pretty good sorting of it. That gets tricky in the fact that that phase 3 is really like a double phase. And where they're going from here, I have no idea. But so let's do a little playing around here. So phase 3 split. So at that point, each set should have 5 movies in it. I should sit facing the camera anyway. Phase 3 should have 5 movies each. I'm cutting off the top of my head here. All right. Each phase should have 5 movies each, roughly. So, and that's like 5 summaries and the main movie for that set. And I suppose if I really had to, I could summarize those 2 movies that precede Infinity War and Endgame. But I feel like that's sort of like counter to what I want to do. So what we do is Cap, Thor, and Black Panther definitely needed. For Infinity War. Civil War, Ragnarok, and Black Panther. And then lesser but still viable options would be like, I don't know that we need Doctor Strange. Like, we can visit him after the fact. Because I feel like nothing that happens in the character's introduction necessarily must predate his actions in Infinity War. So I would say we have Civil War. So we could do Guardians 2. And then Infinity War. After which we would have if you watch Infinity War, like the thing that's going to be on your mind afterwards is, I think you'll want to do Spider-Man. And then Doctor Strange. And then it's Ant-Man and Wasp. I might do Ant-Man and Wasp before Spider-Man. Give you a little distance. And Wasp. It's an unusual sequence of the movies. It's not how they were shared. But then Cap Marvel. And then it's Endgame. So the phase 3 split, I think that works pretty well. It's a little distorted because Spider-Man and Doctor Strange are moved to the other side of Infinity War. But I haven't seen the Spider-Man Homecoming, and I don't think it affected my ability to understand the course of the movie. The Doctor Strange... I think I saw Doctor Strange after I saw Infinity War. And again, I don't think it hurt my ability to watch and enjoy Infinity War. But I feel like with Civil War, you definitely need to see that divide hit between Captain America and Iron Man and understand where that crack in the middle of the Avengers formed. You need to see Thor Ragnarok to understand the loss of the Asgardians. I saw Ragnarok after I saw Infinity War, and I felt like I got a greater understanding of the situation in Infinity War after seeing it, and would have benefited potentially of seeing it beforehand. The consequences would have been more important. Guardians of the Galaxy, I had a little bit before and a little bit after Infinity War. I feel it. Guardians 2 didn't add a lot. I mean, they make an appearance in Infinity War, and their crew roster and some of the circumstances of their lives are changed from Guardians 2, but not in any way that you can't move past if you had to. But Black Panther, like, they serve as part of a battleground during Infinity War. Spoilers, I guess. So you need to sort of have that. The Thor Ragnarok, like, why doesn't he have his hammer? What's going on with his people? All those things about the characters and the situations they're in for his portion of that storyline, like, you kind of have to understand that. So Civil War and Ragnarok, definitely. Black Panther, more than likely you should see that beforehand. You could probably do it afterwards. But I don't know that... It's sort of like one of those situations where either way you go, you'll get a different feel for it. And I feel like ideally what we're going for is Infinity War to have the emotional impact that it should have. And I feel like Black Panther, you get that if you've seen him before that and have a sense of his belonging. And he shows up in Civil War, so you get a sense of that. He might even show up in Winter Soldier, I think. But yeah, so Black Panther sort of needs to be partly involved, and you need to understand and experience Wakanda before Infinity War for it to have some of the impact that it does. Guardians, I mean, The biggest difference is Peter Quill's sense of loss, his relationship with Gamora, who is Mantis, why is Groot the way he is when you get to Infinity War. And that's like mostly it. Like, it doesn't add a whole lot there, but here's the thing. Spider-Man, he makes a brief appearance in Civil War, and he doesn't contribute much to any of the rest of the Avengers storyline yet. Now, his story in his own movie benefits from the existence of Tony Stark in that movie. But I don't know that it cross-pollinates enough with the main Avengers setting to matter. But you can get a sense of Tony Stark's relationship with him during Infinity Wars. They do a pretty good job of that. And I feel they do a decent enough job with introducing Doctor Strange in Infinity War that I don't feel like they're missing enough that you have to see him in previous... Like, you could do Doctor Strange's movie as a prequel that you watch after the fact, and that's fine. I think that works. Ant-Man and Wasp automatically goes after Infinity Wars because the end sequence, like, the whole movie feels like it could happen at any time, but the end credit scene on Ant-Man and Wasp happens at the conclusion of Infinity War. So the timing of that occurrence needs to happen then for its emotional impact to hit. And it was like, when I saw that, it blew me away. That ending on Ant-Man and Wasp was like, oh my. Oh, like, I know what just happened, and like, oh my, I can't believe they did that. Like, it just, like, it blew my mind. And that only works if that happens after Infinity War. So I think what we're looking at here is phase 1 and 2 are pretty straightforward. They're 5 summary videos and prompt to watch the key movie for that phase. So, like, phase 1 would be summary of Iron Man, summary of Incredible Hulk, summary of Iron Man 2, summary of Thor, summary of Captain America, the First Avenger, and then the Avengers movie. And if I have to, I'll summarize Avengers. But I think that's robbing you of an important key moment. And then phase 2 would be summary of Iron Man 3, which, I mean, it's not a huge addition. Summary of Thor: The Dark World. There's some important things in there. You can get by without it, but Captain America: Winter Soldier, that's the movie you have to watch on phase 2. And then Guardians of the Galaxy, like, you could get away with not watching that. Again, these are just some of the characters that show up in Infinity War and Endgame. Like, you're not going to feel like you've been robbed if you don't know who they are later on. I mean, they're fun movies. I mean, all of these you should watch if you have the chance at some point, but we're talking about, like, getting a family member into the theater for Endgame and Infinity War to see how those stories are works of art. And so minimum threshold of entry, I think, should be 4 movies and some summaries. Winter Soldier and then Guardians, Age of Ultron is, to a certain degree, you don't have to see it. All we really need to see is, like, the Hulk, what happens with Hulk. We learn about Vision. Scarlet Witch, and really, we did all that in one movie? Wow, I forgot how loaded that movie is. All right, yeah. So Hulk, Ultron, Vision, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver. All their roles are delineated in Age of Ultron. You could sum those up pretty quickly. Ant-Man movie, again, it's a fun movie. I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man movies, they're fun and enjoyable movies, so anybody should have fun watching them. But for the sake of getting you to the point where you know enough to be able to go in and see Infinity War and Endgame, I feel like we can glaze over them and go back. We can always revisit things if you want to flesh them out again later. But there are 4 key movies in my mind. All right, so. And then 2. And then Thor is a marginally forgettable movie. First Avenger is I actually really enjoyed the first Captain America First Avenger. And then Phase 2. And then Phase 3, Civil War, Ragnarok, Black Panther, Guardians 2, Infinity War. And then Ant-Man and Wasp, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, and then Endgame. And that would get everybody up to speed. I feel like, I don't know if I could do one of these every single day, and I'm not sure I'm ready to jump in full tilt right now. But I do want to do a summary of each of these, like in 5 minutes or less. Tell you all the important things you need to know about each movie. Introduce you to the characters, introduce you to the setting, the situation and the story that happens in it, and the parts that are pertinent to Infinity War and Endgame. So that they're going to be pretty spoilery. And then, like, I feel like that's sort of a crime, is to spoil them, and then say come back and watch them at another time. But let's be real, like some of the people I know, they're not gonna watch them. They're not gonna watch all of these movies. They're not going to watch all of these movies without me making them sit there and watch. And I don't have the time to sit there for, 2 hours every day for a month to make them watch. Yeah, that was a little tricky. 3 hours was a little tricky. I knew going in, like, use the bathroom before you go in and be prepared to hit the bathroom on the way out. It's like, don't eat anything before. Well, if you have blood sugar issues, you may have to handle it a little bit. But yeah, 3 hours can feel like a slog. But honestly, I didn't feel it as 3 hours when I was in the theater. As long as you're not going to need to use the bathroom, or you're not going to have a blood sugar issue, or you're not sleepy and fall asleep in your seat at any given scene, you won't feel the 3 hours. I mean, there were points where I'm like I couldn't tell you how long I'd been in there. There were moments where I was like, oh, they're going to cut it at any moment now and leave it hanging again. And it was like, but there were also moments where I was like, this is an epic story. It feels like this is a full-length novel of a story. It's not like the short summary of a movie that we sometimes get from novels, where if you scripted out the whole movie, it would be half the thickness of the novel. It's rich in detail. So I don't really like, I think as you're watching it, if you have investment in the characters, like if you're invested in the characters, I feel like you're not going to notice the time passing. Like, I don't know how invested you are in the MCU. I think it's some of the most brilliant writing that they've achieved, and some of that only really comes to light after the fact. Like, I would say many of the movies they're okay movies. Like, I would say Thor, the first Thor movie, that's sort of that's a missable movie. You don't miss a lot from it. And I would say like Iron Man 3, like you could probably skip it. But every single one of these movies has elements of the character growth in it. And when you see those things come to fruition in the movies, it makes them feel more powerful. Like Thor: The Dark World, the second Thor movie, is unequivocally ranked by many people as one of the worst Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. It's just a throwaway movie for most people. But there are elements that are put into that movie that are so important to the events in Endgame, and as a consequence, the events in Infinity War, that it just feels like it makes that movie after the fact better than it was at the time I watched it. And so it just sort of feels like it does a weird thing where like it almost rewrites all of the movies that you watched after the fact. And then Winter Soldier. I don't know if Winter Soldier, I mean, I guess technically Winter Soldier came before Age of Ultron. So I should probably do them in that order. But I feel like for simplicity's sake, doing this 5 summaries and then the main movie for each section makes the most sense. So I think I can probably juggle those two against each other, and it doesn't hurt it too much. Age of Ultron. Yeah, I'll have to go back and review and see what I think about that one. And that's like, did you ever see Ready Player One? Because that's one of those movies, like there's a lot of similarity in Ready Player One in the fact that like Ready Player One has a lot of 80s nostalgia in it. And it's one of those things where like a lot happens on the screen at once. And you're going to be chasing down clues. And like if you watch Ready Player One 5 times, you're going to catch things each time that you didn't catch the first time. And I feel like Endgame especially, like I think Infinity War has some of that, but I feel like Endgame especially has a sense of there's just so much in this that every time I watch this in the future, I will feel different moments differently and catch things, and it'll feel like a slightly different movie each time I watch it because of the different experience I have of it. Yeah, Ready Player One it's a pretty good movie. It's a very Steven Spielberg-y kind of movie, and it deviates a fair bit from the book it's based off of. But I feel like the movie deviates in a way that makes for a better movie. The book makes a decent book. And it's a little more grim and a little bit more dystopian,
whereas the movie is it feels like a 1980s Steven Spielberg, almost like a Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of movie, but done in a science fiction setting. And barely science fiction. It's a fun movie, and the way it explores some of those concepts in a Steven Spielberg format works for me in that sense. But it's visually stunning, and there are like big battle scenes, and in those big battle scenes there's like, oh, there's like the characters from the original Doom game, and you've got characters from what's the big one, the one with the girl in the suit of armor that was a big deal on Nintendo because it was like this space shoot aliens kind of character, and nobody knew the main character was female until like the end of it or something like that. Metroid. There you go. I think that's what it is. And so like you have Metroid and you have Doom and they have some Overwatch characters in it because it was shot recently, and so they're just throwing you a bit of a bone. You've got like the DeLorean from Back to the Future. You got some Ghostbuster things and Godzilla, the Iron Giant. Like just a fan service storyline. It's like a treasure hunt, puzzle solving kind of romp of a movie. And it's just sort of fun. But it also loads the setting and the story and the characters with a lot of stuff. And like you don't really feel like you're missing out on the movie if you don't catch it all on the first pass, but it's definitely a movie that makes you feel like I can give this multiple passes and enjoy it differently each time because I catch things I didn't see before. And it's sort of like that for Endgame. So I guess I didn't intend this to be a sequel to last night's raving about Endgame, but I just left here last night with that thought in my mind about like I talked about how like if I were to get my mom to watch the newer movie, like I would have to summarize most of these movies so that she could get a feeling for the characters and the setting and the story up to that point. And then I got to thinking, like as I was laying there, I'm like, I think I could do that. Like there are, I think you said you saw one of the Ant-Man movies. The character Lewis, Ant-Man's friend, oftentimes telling him, like, give me a little information on this situation. It's like I was in the art museum with my cousin Tony, and we were looking at this amazing Rothko. And I'm more of an abstract rather than and so, so when he goes on these rambles, I got to thinking, like, if I did one of those about each of the movies up until the Infinity War movie, that would be hilarious. But it would also summarize it enough for my mom to get a sense of these movies and then be able to feel and experience the Infinity War and Endgame stories with a little more substance than they have if you just walk in not knowing any of the characters or the events leading up to it. It would be so kind of fun to do. I don't know if it would be entirely successful for my mom, and I'm still going back and forth about whether or not I'm going to do it. And part of that is like, I feel like some of these movies are missable. Like you can miss them and they're not going to hurt you. But some of them, like, they're good movies, and I feel like if you get invested with understanding, the main storyline of the whole 4 phases, it's really 3 phases, but 4 phases is what I'm breaking it into. But if you go 4 phases on this one, each of those phases, some of the story progresses from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, and then eventually all the way to Endgame. And to get a feeling for that, I can summarize a lot of stuff and bring you along for that ride. But in doing so, like some of the things that would occur in a summary of like Captain America, the First Avenger is a good movie to watch by itself. And I feel like if I summarized it, I might ruin some of that. I mean, when you go back and say, like, I'm invested in the characters, when you see Endgame and you go, like, oh, those are powerful characters. I want to go back and see the story of that character. Like, going back after seeing a summary and then seeing the consequences of the whole story arc in Endgame, I feel like it might spoil the Captain America movie. Like, I mean, Ant-Man's movies do okay without, like, you can't really spoil them. They're still going to be good movies to go back for. And Age of Ultron, like, you're not missing much. You can still go back for it, and you don't even have to. But like the big ones, like Avengers, Winter Soldier, Infinity War, and Endgame, those are for, like, you should watch those. Avengers sets the, like, the whole series of movies starts with Iron Man, the ones that made it possible. Iron Man made it possible. Hulk is missable. Iron Man 2, you don't need to be there for it. Thor, you could miss. Captain America, I would kind of say, is the other part. Like, if you did Iron Man 1 and Captain America 1, those are the two that really cement the fact that when you hit Avengers movie, this is no longer just a series of loose, jumbled story ideas. This is a legitimate, like, oh, this is something special. And I'm on board for it however far they want to take this train. But if you miss Iron Man, like, I can summarize Iron Man and I can summarize Captain America well enough that if you take Avengers, you can kind of get most of that feel. And you could probably go back and watch Iron Man and Captain America. But I feel like if I do the quick intros, or the, you know, I think I was going to call them speed runs of the movies. If I did those, some of the key moments in the Iron Man movie and some of the key moments in the Captain America movie, they will lose a little bit of their impact because you know they're there, because I spoiled it for you essentially. But I don't think it's as bad as it would be if, yeah, I'm still kind of debating whether or not that's enough of a distinction. Like, I think the trade-off is really, like, if that's what I have to do to get somebody in to see Infinity War and Endgame, like my mother or my sister, maybe, or maybe one or two of my friends or somebody who wouldn't otherwise go see these, like, they have to be paying attention right now and noticing that these movies have hit record ticket sales around the world. It is one of the biggest grossing movie franchises out there ever. And each of the Infinity War and Endgame movies are like everybody was talking about them. Like Infinity War, people were talking about it, and it's like everybody's like, don't spoil it, I'm going to see it on Saturday. Everybody's talking about it. And just like afterwards, everybody's like, oh man, I cried at this, it was so powerful, and this and that. And then, like, I got to imagine there are some people out there that wonder, like, I wonder if I should go see these movies. And then look at this list of 22 movies and go, oh, I'm not going to put the effort into getting into that. Like, I've had that issue with books in the past. There have been a couple books where I'm like, this seems to be a fairly popular series of books by this author that I know nothing about the books and I know nothing about the author. So I sat down and I read the first book and how is a little interesting. It feels like it's the setup for a series. So let me check. Oh, there are 13 other books. You know what? The first book was over 800 pages long, and I don't need to get any of the other 13 books. I'm good. It's way too much for me to get involved with all that. And I never finished that series. I never really went back further into it. And you know, I am a fan of the Frank Herbert's Dune, which is a good series. I think I fell in love with the movie first, and then I read the first book, and I liked that. I've dabbled at exploring the rest of the universe in the subsequent books, but it's a thick shelf full of world building and history and political strife and stuff like that. And some of it drags in the middle of it. And that's just what Frank Herbert wrote. After his passing, his son took over and expanded more in the universe. And it's just like there are parts of it, because I'm so invested in the mythology, that I may get around to reading some of the expansions on topics that I'm kind of curious about. But I am not going to read every single one of those books in sequence. That's easily 3 months worth of reading. And that's like if I do a book per day or two. I mean, they're pretty big books too. And so like I love the setting as it was created. I think I do well enough with the first book, and I'm ready to call it. I enjoyed the movies. I enjoyed the miniseries that Sci-Fi did. I'm curious to see what they do with the new movie. I consider myself a Frank Herbert's Dune fan, but I am not enough of a fan to spend months of my life learning all the minutiae of a series of books that, yeah, I mean, I have my geekdom of Star Wars and Star Trek, and I can tell you things about Star Wars and Star Trek that most people will never know because they're not that into it. I think I've reached a point where there's like a monopoly of my brain space on some of those. And I feel like for somebody like my mom or my sister, they look at this list of Marvel movies and they think, that's too much to get into. But I feel like if we do it right, I could do the equivalent of letting them experience the first book in a way that doesn't involve them having to sit through 22 movies to get there. Like the Avengers movie with a little summary leading up to it, the Winter Soldier movie with a lot of the backstory of the five movies leading up to it, and then the 4 movies leading up to Infinity War, and then the 4 movies leading up to Endgame. Summarize those and just let them watch each of those 4 movies. That's sort of 8 or 9 hours of movie still, and that seems like a lot. But if we do something like, I don't know that I'll be able to get them to go to the theater for it, but if we lead you up to Avengers, the first movie, and then, you know, watch that 1 week, and then a week or 2 later, we lead you up to Winter Soldier, and then a week or 2 later, we lead you up to Infinity War. I'm pretty sure by the point you see Infinity War, you are fully and completely ready to go all the way to Endgame if you have to. Like, you're invested at that point. Like, I know when I watched Infinity War in the theater, I'm like, oh, I'm ready. I need to see how this resolves. Like, I need this next movie. I need this now. And, you know, waiting, what is it? Has it been a year or 2 years waiting for this movie? And, you know, when we hear it's coming, we're like, oh, yeah, it's coming, yeah. And I was like, I was so excited, but I also was so absolutely determined not to be spoiled going into it. I literally avoided my social media for at least a week. Like for 3 days leading up to the opening night, because I know some people who live in other countries and they had a release date that was different. So I know people in Australia and England who had a different release time. And I was like, I can't listen to or look or like, and I know some people in the media industry who actually get early screenings. And I'm like, nope, I cannot listen or read anything these people are posting from, I think the opening night was Wednesday night at midnight. And depending on time zone, some people got before that. And some of my industry friends were before that. And so it's sort of kind of like, oh my goodness. So I had to do like the week leading up to the opening night and all through the weekend because I wasn't going into a theater opening weekend, like not on a Friday night, not on a Saturday night, not on a Sunday. I'm not going in on any of those days because I'm going to get a terrible seat and I'm going to get a terrible audience because they're going to be making all kinds of horrible noises, and like I just want to be able to go in and see the movie. And so I was like, my best option is early afternoon on a Monday when everybody else is at work, go in and see the movie. And so that was my plan. And I knew when I was going to go in to do this movie. So I knew I had to cut all social media for days beforehand so that I didn't get any part of it spoiled. And I did really well because I'd not seen most of that movie coming. So, and I think that's like, it's one of the movies where Infinity War and Endgame are two movies that you should not let anybody spoil for you. And I feel like part of the reason I pick some of the others are that they have such pivotal events in them. So Avengers is really the first time we see them all together as a team. And when they pull together like that, that's an important moment in the setting. Winter Soldier is when you start to see that not everything is above board like we think it is. And it's funny because Avengers is very classic. It feels sort of like a classic superhero movie, whereas Winter Soldier is more of a Cold War spy thriller. And Infinity War, it's sort of like a heroic last stand sort of movie. And Endgame is just the way you tie it all together, all these different movies. Like Ant-Man and Wasp, they're heist movies. Black Panther is a sort of a, I mean, it's sort of it's a Black Power movie. It's finding an identity for a people to define for themselves, and that was an interesting movie. I have some interesting thoughts on that movie. I don't know if I ever reviewed that one. Civil War, that's sort of a mystery to be solved and a catch the bad guy kind of movie with a sense of betrayal in the middle late end. Guardians is just like a buddy heist comedy, and that's fun. Captain America is a sort of a World War, sort of like a veterans movie. They all have a little bit of their own flavor to them. But the flavor it mixes together well in the whole story arc. And so yeah, it's just like I'm still incredibly impressed with how they pulled all of this off. But I think it would be fun to give people the opportunity. That's the thing I have to keep in mind. It's interesting that comes up now. Like, I have to give people, I have to get into my head that, like, I'm not forcing anybody to watch any of these that I do. I will label them with spoilers. But if I do these, it's going to be like Iron Man, the first Iron Man movie speed run. And it's going to be 5 minutes or less. I'm going to give you all the important plot points so you understand how the story went and all the parts that link to later movies that are important for you to know. And throw in a little bit of silliness in the midst of it. So it's a little bit of a fun, just speed through and just an absurd way to do it. But 5 minutes or less, you understand the movie. And Hulk, do the same thing. Iron Man 2, do the same thing. Thor, do it. Captain America, First Avenger, do it. And then Avengers, like, sort of at that point, I feel like you need to watch the Avengers movie. But I can throw in a summary of that too. And all of them will have spoilers on them. So if you get to a point where you're like, oh, this sounds like an interesting story arc, then stop. Get out of the speed ride and watch them, because it'll be worth it. But if you just want to see if you can get through the entirety of the thing and get a sense for the whole story arc, I think the speed runs would be fun to do. And so I've sort of been brainstorming on that today. But part of the reason I say it's interesting is one of the other things I have to think about is it's one of the reasons I've struggled a little bit with getting my channel out there to other people is I don't push it. I don't sell the channel. I don't treat it like everybody who potentially sees one of my videos is a customer. So I'm not trying to get you to buy it. I want you to want to be part of this. And I want anybody else viewing to want to be a part of this. And so I don't push it aggressively. But I realize sometimes that if I don't parade it around a little bit for people to see it, that people who would otherwise enjoy participating won't notice it. They won't find it, and they won't even seek it out. It's like, it's one of the things I say about people who are worried about, like, oh, you used to have to wait for the radio stations to play your favorite songs instead of loading up your queue of your favorite songs on Pandora or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, some of my absolute favorite pieces of music happened because I was exposed to somebody that I didn't know about through a radio play of that song. Like, I legitimately wouldn't know half of my favorite songs if somebody hadn't introduced them to me either through a mixtape or a radio broadcast or like just sharing your favorite songs with other people. And so these people who only listen to songs they already like they're not getting the same sampler that we used to get. And I feel like we have the similar issue with YouTube. Smaller YouTubers, there are 100,000 of us every day easily that post something that nobody notices. And part of that is, like, you've got to do something to get in front of your audience. You have to be found. But you should do something that makes it so that you can be found. And I don't do that well. I don't push my stuff on people well. And that's the way I see it. But part of that is, like I was talking about with these movies, is like I need to not look at it as, like, if I do a speed run of each of these movies, I'm not making you watch them. I'm not spoiling these movies for you. You have the option to watch them. And if you do that and it spoils the movie for you, it's because you chose to do that because you didn't think you were ready to see that. you weren't willing to put the 2-hour effort in to see Thor: The Dark World. I wouldn't blame you. But if you go and watch the 5-minute or less summary of it, and then feel like, oh, I should have watched the movie, well, that's sort of on you at that point. And so I gotta think about that for each of these movies. I'm not forcing anybody to watch them. If I do a speed run of each of them, nobody's being forced. And by the same token, I'm not forcing anybody to watch my videos, subscribe to my channel, or anything like that. I'm just trying to make sure that anybody who does want to see what I'm doing gets the chance. And it goes back to when I was traveling around to maker spaces. I had a few people. It was like, oh yeah, this sounds like a great project. Are there any things we can do to help? And I'm like, I haven't really thought about it. And he goes, think about it. Like, they were legitimately angry that I didn't have a path for them to participate or help in the project. And I'm like, it wasn't on my mind. I didn't figure that out. I don't. So, I mean, I have to think about that better. And I have to take some of that into consideration with things like this. So I may spend the next few days creating a new project. Who knew? Of things I have to do on top of everything else. But I jokingly, oh, woe is me. But it's not so much that like this is another responsibility I have to take up, but this is like, I'm excited about this. I think it's a fun idea and I want to do it. Where am I going to fit it in? That might be the tricky part, but I'll do what I can. So it's about, like, the first 2 phases would be 6 episodes long, 5 minutes or less. And then the phase 3 part 1 would be 5 episodes long. No. Okay. First phase would be 5 episodes long if you then watched Avengers as a whole movie. 6 if I summarize Avengers as the movie. Phase 2 would also be 5 episodes long unless you didn't watch Winter Soldier and you watched a summary of Winter Soldier as well. So 6 total for that one. Phase 3, I'm not going to do a speed run on Infinity War. You have to watch that one. I'm not speaking specifically to you, but any viewer who does this. And then second half of phase 3, 4 more summaries, and I'm not going to do Endgame. Okay, so that's not super bad. That's sort of 5. So that's like Monday through Friday, a speed run, 5 minutes or less each day to shoot and post them. If I do it completely live. I don't know that I'll do it live. I may record it as if it were live, but I'll probably edit it. Because I can't imagine in 5 minutes or less, I will get a coherent narrative together for these. I may give it a try. I'll try to script it beforehand. So it's probably going to be a couple hours of scripting for each one. And I feel like the way I really want to do it is just do a few still frames from each movie to show, like, this is this character and this is this character. And this character says to this character, yada, yada, yada. And then this character goes off here and does this. And then this happens and these things happen. And this villain shows up, ha, ha, ha. And like, that would be so much fun. Oh, God. That would be so goofy. So that could be really fun to do that way for each movie. But to do it that way would take a little bit more time and a little more editing to get it done right. But since it'll be 5 minutes or less as a video, it won't be as big a time exporting and uploading as some of my other videos. So that might be nice. But edit time might be substantially more than I would prefer. And hunting down the stock images that I can use for those might be a little tricky too. Like I will potentially have to see if I can find really large, high quality still frames from the movies and trim them so it's not a direct screenshot. I don't know. I might even have to see if I can snag some comic book images and crop them. So I do think that would be fun to do. I don't know when I'm going to get that started. I might do that. I might wait till the start of next week before I even start doing the first one, but I may start scripting right now. I got to think about that a little bit. Because I still want to do this. I mean, if I do it at one a day all the way through to Infinity War, and then the subsequent movies after that, it's 20 movies without Infinity War and Endgame. So if I do one a day with every 6 days a break, it's close to 4 weeks of content. So like you won't get to the point of Endgame until the end of the month. How long do movies stay in theaters? I don't even remember anymore. I'm so used to getting there at the last minute. Will Avengers Endgame still be in theaters in early June? Possibly. I mean, at that point, I feel like I almost want to do 2 per day, but that's a lot of workload with the rest of the stuff that I'm doing. I'll think about what I need to do. I'll come to a conclusion by tomorrow. Because we're at 1 hour and 7 minutes. You're on a tablet. So I think it's a good point to cut it for tonight. I thank you for joining me. And I did notice that one of my videos from like the day before yesterday was set to private. I don't recall that I set it to that, but I switched it over to public. So if it's out of sequence, that's just how it happened. I don't know what happened, but it's good to see that it's now public again. So, alrighty, I will see you for tomorrow. Good night. Ooh, feels warm in here.